Hello and welcome to the Classic Car Weekly podcast, the sibling podcast to the popular weekly title. I'm the staff writer Jesse Billington, and I've got a packed roster of co-hosts with me today: editor David Simister, managing editor James Sadlier, and features editor Chris Hope. Gentlemen, how are we, and indeed, how are the classics?
Yeah, I think having a good week. I've been playing around with my household dehumidifier with the MX-5 this week, so I tried it out. Those of you who listen regularly might remember my incident where I managed to have a feline intruder into my Toyota, and it got all sorts of rainwater and muck in it. So I tried it out with the household dehumidifier for a couple of days, and it worked an absolute treat. It's looked better, smelt better, the whole aura of it was better. So I thought, well, the Mazda's been sat out there, looking quite sad for a few months over the winter. Even with the new roof, it's still got a little bit of condensation inside. So again, I tried it out, and it was great. Just having it running away in the background, and it just seems to have done really good things. So you can buy all sorts of dehumidifying pouches and things like that from various different shops, but actually plugging something in and having it running is actually a really good way of getting rid of the muck and grime out of your car's interior, particularly where, this sort of time of year when you get your car up and running after winter.
We'll touch on getting cars up and running after winter. Chris, James, anything going on in your garages?
After you, Chris.
Oh, I'm going to go first, am I? No, there's not, because my daily BMW has rather taken priority. I had an incredible time over in Stuttgart, attending the Retro Classics event. Fabulous event, which you can read about in this next issue, wasn't it? So
yeah, 12th of March.
So yes, do have a look at that. Thoroughly recommend that people save the date for next year and take a look at it. It'll be in February. But yeah, on the way back from Heathrow, I had an unfortunate coming together with a Fox, which damaged bits of under tray on my 1 Series daily. So yeah, I've had to sort of take a step back from the Mini and try and get that sort of thing. It's not dangerous to drive or anything daft like that, but it is quite unsightly. And yeah, it's just one of those unfortunate things where wildlife decides it wants to sort of appear right in the middle of the A421 at midnight sort of thing. So, which it has every right to do, but it is a little bit of an inconvenience sort of thing. So yeah, the poor Mini is sat continually being ignored, but I am going to have to give it some attention soon, because it's down to appear at the Practical Classics Classic Car and Restoration Show later this month. So I'm very quickly running out of days where I can give it some love sort of thing. So it's definitely going to need it sooner rather than later.
We had that conversation actually in a previous podcast, didn't we, where our classics had come together with wildlife and never really ended well, and that's just another tale to add to that, isn't it? Really, it doesn't take much. I mean, like I mentioned before, that pigeon that hit my Peugeot, it took the entire front grille out, and it's just a pigeon. So a fox, goodness knows, Well, I mean, poor fox. We can't actually say no fox,
but as my wife tried to console me, because I was quite upset about unaliving poor Mr. Foxy, that it means some rabbits will be alive and will live on sort of thing. So they're not going to be dinner for Mr. Foxy in any evening anytime soon sort of thing. So yeah, we'll go with that, shall we?
And maybe the odd chicken.
James, how's things with the Polo?
Yeah, pretty good actually. I hate to say it. I always touch wood when I say with the Polo, because it is my everyday. I'm literally looking at it right now out the window, and lovingly, it's ticking along quite nicely. It does make a great everyday car. I was saying to David yesterday that I've not only found matching interior, as in seats and door cards, mainly for the driver's seat and the driver's door card, which have really deteriorated. The rest of the interior is very, looks 5-10 years old. It looks fairly new still, but the guy selling it has actually also offered to install it for me, which I could possibly figure out how to do it myself. But this guy specializes in ripping apart cars and putting them back together. He'd do them in a fifth of the time. So I've fallen on, really landed on my feet there.
I'm shaking my head here because I can't believe quite how lucky you've been.
especially with that interior. I went through an interior on a website that offers all the Polo interiors, and it just scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. There's hundreds. So to find the exact one, and it came from, oddly enough, mine's a bread van, as you can see from the picture there, but it came from an old GT coupe. So even that, great. Who would have thought that was interchangeable? But it is. So yeah. So I don't think I'll get it installed in time for the Resto show. But as David added it, with the original well-used seat, it adds some charm to a Resto show. Resto show presentation, I guess. It's the best way of explaining it. So, maybe something to sort out after the Resto show.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with a bit of patina. Just you could do with something a bit more comfy at this point, though, couldn't you?
Oh yeah. It's lost its seat bolstering, so I think probably those chairs you sit on in primary school offer more comfort at the moment.
Yeah, under heavy cornering, there's a lot of hip roll as you sort of lean through the seat, as it were.
Yeah. How about you, Jesse? How's it going with your midget and Mustang?
Mustang's been quiet for a while. The Riley's have been quiet for a while, but the Jimny is back on the road, running nicely, staying cool. It's now got coolant in the system. I think I submitted now classics on sort of getting that all fixed and fitted to Chris the other night. So that will be coming up in a future issue. And in the issue that's out at the moment, you can read about how my MG broke last time in September last year. So yeah, that's all getting back on track. I spoke to the machine shop that have got the engine yesterday. They've skimmed the head, they've honed the bores, they've balanced the crankshaft and flywheel. They're just getting some bearings seated, which will be delivered today. So I should be able to pick it up early next week, which will mean I'll finally have an engine to start reassembling. Better news still is the people that are making the custom aluminium radiator have got in touch and asked which side do I want the mountings for the electric fan system. So that's all heading in the right direction. That build is progressing really nicely. So yeah, touch wood, we might have it on the road for Drive It Day. It's still very tight. I think we're getting close to sub 50 days at the moment. I've got the countdown on my phone here. It is until Drive It Day at the time of recording 52 days. So it's tight, but I've got a good group of friends around me that will help me with the assembly and certainly the reinstallation. So we should, touch wood, have it back on the road for Drive It Day at the end of April. But we'll see how that pans out. It's looking optimistic. Yeah.
Touch wood, not water.
Yes, yeah, trying to avoid touching water as much as possible.
You've had it enough brothers recently with your midget, so
yes, yeah. Especially when they've honed through one of the bores on the block and found a very small pinhead-sized sort of flaw in the casting. And it doesn't seem to have been a problem previously. The honing hasn't sort of revealed it as such. It was just where obviously the block's stripped down and they've cleaned it and inspected it. They've noticed it. But equally, prior to this, it wasn't mixing oil and water. So I've not got a problem with water seeping through the cooling jacket into the sort of crankcase. And it's not been blowing out through there under compression. It had pretty good, healthy compression and the original engine was performing well. So yeah, we're gonna leave that be for the moment and see how it fares. But there's a far more detailed build than when I simply bought an engine and chucked it in last time. This is completely down to literally bare block, strip it, paint it, full internals. So yeah, we're heading in the right direction. Everything is coming together nicely, and like I said, you can pick up latest issue and read about when it went wrong in September last year and involved David Sinister pushing it into a hotel car park at about 11:30 at night.
Just after last orders, I seem to remember.
That was the most grating part of it. Was just after last order, so I couldn't even drown my sorrows. Anyway, we'll move on from that and we'll dive into the first proper section of this week's podcast, and it's the news, and we're looking into Morehampstead Motor Museum and its exhibits, which are for sale. This is the sad sort of closure of a motor museum and the question of what next for it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I think, quite a sad tale. So we've been reporting on the fate of the museum. Frank Loft's looking to sell up to a new owner. He's had this museum open since 2012, been adding sort of classics to it ever since. It's sort of 13 years. He's taken sort of a massive big collection of cars and bikes in Dartmoor in Devon, and sadly he hasn't had the offers to sort of take it over as a going lot. He's holding out until next Monday, so which is the 10th of March. So if you're looking to open up a tourist attraction in the Devon area, here's one ready made for you. But if that doesn't happen, then the cars and the bikes are going to be heading to auction. So Charterhouse, which is quite a well-established auctioneer, they're better known for holding their sales at the Haynes Museum over in Somerset. They're going to be holding a sale of the various cars, bikes, and motor memorabilia in May. And there's some really interesting stuff going through. There's various sort of 60s and 70s Fords, there's bubble cars, there's a Bond Bug, Vauxhall Velox, quite a few nice sort of pre-war cars, Jag XK150. So it's a bit of a treasure trove, this of of different cars and bikes coming up. So there's going to be some really interesting cars coming up, and I always love it when the former museum cars as well, because that even though they haven't been running for a while, they've generally been obviously stored indoors for years, and often they can be quite significant or low mileage examples. So potentially there's going to be some real finds coming to market.
I'm looking at the photos here, and you've got a Messerschmitt, you've got a soft top Mini. It almost looks like a shorty. So there's all sorts in there by the look of it.
It's a shame, isn't it, though? Because you'd like to see almost that kind of the Great British Car Journey in Derbyshire. That's such a lovely museum. And I feel like I know it's not looking good at someone at the moment of trying to find a buyer for this, but if it could have found its way to kind of being something similar to the Great British Car Journey down in Devon, because you've got the Motor Museum down at Sparkford, down that neck of the woods. So there is, I think, the smaller museums. It's just so sad. But as you've both said, it's a fabulous opportunity to kind of buy some of these at auction. How much is it going for, David? The if someone was to buy the museum as it is now, they've got until, when was it, Monday? Did you say?
I think it's a case of getting in touch with Frank Loft and make him an offer. I mean, he said he did have an offer, but it was nowhere near what he was looking for. So again, but I think he's looking to retire. It's not because sort of anything particular that's happened in the museum. It's basically he's spent sort of many years building this site up, and is but he obviously you get to a stage where you can't carry on running these things forever. So that's why he's looking to sell up. But it's sad because there are some really exciting things going on with museums around the country, even though there have been challenges to revenue ever since the pandemic. So obviously we've seen the Great British Car Journey have done a lot to broaden their appeal. They've got obviously the Drive Dad's Car attraction, where you can go out and actually get behind the wheel of a classic. They've got their club meets. The British Motor Museum at Gavin, they're doing a lot to sort of redevelop their site. I know that the National Motor Museum at Bewley, they've had a grant through, so again they're redeveloping a lot of their attractions as well. And let's not forget as well that Maurice Leslie, who as you guys will know, has the classic car auction business in Scotland, he's got planning permission to open a big museum just outside Perth. And I think a big part of that is that actually there's going to be a hotel attached to it. There's going to be camping lodges. So it's all about these days. It's making sure that it's not just if you're going to a museum, you can't just rock up with a shed and some grubby cars hidden away. These days it's got to be a real family day out in order to make sure that you're winning over as much audience as possible. So there's some really exciting things going on in the industry, and I hope that hopefully someone does come through and offers to buy the museum and carry on going and expanding it. But if not, I'd say there's some really exciting cars coming to market.
Can you see other museums buying?
Sorry, go on, Jeff.
Oh no, I was about to say but can you see other museums coming in to bid for some of these cars, given that they are, some people might choose to not drive them because they are, almost time warp examples, and they would be better suited to being on display rather than being used. Could you see some other museums that you mentioned kind of maybe coming in to, pick up a few of these?
It could happen. I think it's more likely that you will see significant examples of cars being snapped up by other museums rather than the museum as a whole being snapped up by another organisation outright. But you never know. It's I mean, there are museums that have expanded. We've seen that with the Imperial War Museum. They've done things where they have multiple sites operating across the country. So it's not unprecedented, but I think particularly because museums are so often built around a labour of love where they have a particular theme that's being followed, I think it's probably unlikely that it'll be snapped up in its entirety by another motoring museum.
No, what are you going to say, Chris?
Well, first of all, yeah, you're absolutely right, the two of you. I think what you'll find is that if you are lucky enough to have your own private collection of cars, maybe a small fleet, then a lot of the cars in here are going to be of interest for the reasons you've already said. Low mileage, pristine condition, and undoubted historical significance for them to find their way into a museum in the first place. It was just on David's point that he was making about museums having to be more than just a shed. I think there's a lot of parallels here about the conversations we've been having in previous podcasts about events, and how it has to now be more than just a sort of a traditional approach to an event whereby it's cars in a field, rock up at 10 o'clock, leave at 4 o'clock, and that's as much as the day has to offer, sort of thing. There's parallels here with museums as well, sort of thing. We've seen lots of initiatives, the likes of Withall Transport Museum and what we've been doing with them, with supporting them for their cars and coffee meets. It can't just be a single sort of interest anymore. As disappointing as that is, and as certain I am that there is absolutely a demand for these sort of places and this kind of location and venue. You've got to branch out, unfortunately, and it's one of those where there's got to be a way of getting these 70+ exhibits in this instance to people beyond just sort of expecting them to come and visit. It's sort of sharing them on socials and things like that and driving up those sort of demands as well. So, but likewise, it's unrealistic to expect poor old sort of Frank Loft on his own in his 70s to do that by himself, sort of thing. So it's unfortunate, and I'm disappointed to sort of see the museum disappear if that is what eventually happens. But all we can hope is that some of these cars and exhibits and memorabilia that are going to be dispersed, we see them at shows around the UK, and I think that's going to be the best win, isn't it?
In the article, as it's written, I think Frank is looking for sort of 1 to 1.2 million is sort of the opening offer he's looking for someone to buy the entire package, which is a lot of money given sort of the current sort of circumstances. Equally, you're getting a lot for it, but you've got to try and earn that back through revenue at some point. And like we said, it's a trying time for sort of museums and similar businesses. But equally, there is good news. I've been speaking to Grampian Transport Museum about their upcoming event schedule, and they've had a huge sort of rise in interest since purchasing the old Top Gear vehicles. They have seen sort of floods of bookings that they're sort of having to really start to sort of moderate quite how many people they're going to have turning up on a given day, which is there is good news and sort of silver linings out there for a lot of these locations and sort of offerings in the sort of classic world. So it's not all doom and gloom, which is a sort of a nice point to sort of round the sort of museum piece out on. We'll move into a quick sort of dive into the opening of our buying section this week, which is the new market that seems to be opening up in India for classic cars, and potentially the sort of further flung impacts this might have on sort of prices and availability in sort of UK and other nations as this emerging market starts to snaffle up classics.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because India is the most populous nation on earth. It is the third biggest car market in the world as well. And, it used to be the case that you could import a car, but it was only up to 1950. You can import a car. They've now changed that, so it's now 1975, and it's going to be on a rolling 50-year basis, which actually brings it more into line with what, say, the United States do, where they have they have rules where it's a 25-year rolling rule. So again, it means that certain cars will become eligible for imports where they weren't previously, and it potentially opens up all of the classic cars that are here in the UK made between 1950 and 1975, it means that someone could, in theory, if they're based in India, they could bid on it online here, purchase it, and have it shipped over to India. So it's potentially a really big market, and we know that there are a lot of particularly with the sort of the rise of the Indian economy over the past decade or so, means that there are quite a lot of very wealthy buyers who potentially might be interested in cars based in the EU and the UK. But there is a caveat in that you have to pay various imports and fees and stuff, and it works out to more than twice what the vehicle's worth. You have to pay in duties, and there are restrictions on what you can do with selling and reuse. So if you think that if you've got a Morris Oxford and you think that you're going to make an absolute killing selling it to someone based in Mumbai, I'd probably urge some caution on that.
Right. So it's a little bit about the conversation we've just had, where it is going to be of interest to those sort of wealthy private collectors who have something very, very specific in mind and are willing to pay whatever it costs to have it.
Yeah, I think so, and it almost in a way parallels. I remember sort of covering about a decade or so, there were moves to try and open up the Chinese market to classic cars, and again, if that happened, that would be absolutely huge, because that is by far and away the biggest car market in the world. But the thing with it is a lot of these collectors, what they do at the moment is, if they're talking about seriously high-end buys, previously they've been buying the cars anyway, but they've been keeping them offshore.
And equally, the interesting thing to mention, I think, obviously, don't think that this is going to be an absolutely huge market. I think an interesting metric to think about this by is also the fact that less than half of the Indian population has access to the internet. So when we're talking about this being a growing market, I think we need to also bear in mind the general scope as to which this is a market. This is a very small market that is starting to open up, but it's one that's going to be buying at sort of certainly the upper echelons of the classic car world.
And you'll see some of those prices at auction. It'll be the odd car here and there, but it'll raise those prices to those people who are really eager for that really unique car. It's interesting that there might be the odd one that thinks, well, hang on a second, I could make a really good road trip out of this. I can drive it from the UK to India. It's not like you can do that with the people who are having cars shipped in from America. But if they're not worried about putting a few miles on the clock on a car of their choice, and it's not something that they don't want to just collect and keep stored away and polish every week, and they think, well, I could see myself driving around wherever it is I am in India and showing it off to my friends, but also what a great road trip that could be.
Heck of an adventure.
Yeah. Oh, certainly. Yeah, there is definitely a thriving scene for it, and especially when you look at historic motorcycle is an interesting one when it comes to India. That's always been sort of the precursor to this. The Royal Enfield brand is huge over there, and it is incredibly well respected. We're sort of seeing that effect starting to trickle out into the world of classic cars now. So there is certainly this evidence that this is going to lead to a growth and a change in the way that these cars are sort of bought, shipped, and sort of processed around the world. But I think what we're seeing here is very much the tip of an iceberg that is slowly emerging.
David, I found it really interesting that the editorial decision to illustrate this piece was with a very early sort of Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. Do you think that's sort of representative of the kind of cars that you can expect being of interest, rather than sort of like the Morris Minors that you referred to?
I think it could well be things like Rolls Royces again, and the interesting thing with that particular shot actually was that one of them is a Shadow 1 and the other one's a Shadow 2.
Shadow 2 with a rubber bumper spotted.
Yeah, which means of course that one of them is not eligible for import, but it will be in a couple of years. So,
yeah, with rolling.
Yeah, so again with that rolling side of things, it means that it could be quite interesting. But yeah, certainly I would expect you're probably more likely to see someone buying a Rolls Royce or an Aston or an E-Type because there are a lot of very very wealthy Indian buyers at the moment already who are buying things, and they're either buying pre-1950 cars or they're buying later cars and keep them offshore. It means that they've now potentially got the ability to bring them directly to their homes. But I think people buying, I don't think there's going to be a huge torrent of people buying Austin 1100s or Ford Anglias or things like that, particularly now.
It'd be interesting to see this time next year what trends have occurred, and be able to get some figures on what cars are the most popular over there. And it might be that there's a lot of sellers out there and dealers out there who go and promote those particular brands at the Indian market because there's evidence to prove that people are after those Rolls Royces, as you just said, David.
I think an interesting one I'd like to sort of look at as it sort of develops, is sort of following off what James said, is we often tout sort of how much the classic car industry is worth to the UK economy. How much is the classic car industry worth to other national economies? Compare it to, say, America, France, Germany, and then see sort of where it is in relation to sort of the sort of GDP of India, and as it grows and changes, sort of how we can then sort of track the growth of that on a sort of financial side of things. We say that in the UK, the classic car industry is worth more than sort of golf or fishing. We have this sort of great visual metric of it. What's it worth to other countries, and sort of how does that rank the UK as sort of a classic industry against the rest of the world? I think that'd be an interesting sort of metric to sort of try and compile. I feel like I may have shot myself in the foot and
You've
sort of
I've
written myself into an assignment there, but yes, it's it just feels like it'd be an interesting way to sort of look at and chart this sort of growth and development and see sort of which nation does genuinely have the sort of biggest per capita or just overall classic car market when it comes to value to economy. I think it's an interesting thing as we change.
Yeah, no, classic car, I mean, the historic vehicle movement, obviously it's of huge value to the UK. And again, this is reflected in other countries as well. I mean, one of the pieces I was looking at this morning is that over in California, there's been a move to exempt cars more than 35 years old from the anti-smog laws over there. And that's been championed by a chap you may know called Jay Leno, who's got a couple of cars in that part of the world. So again, there is a real kind of groundswell of support for older vehicles because they contribute far more economically than they do in terms of annual pollutants. They're often driven sort of quite sparingly by people who contribute a lot of money to the economy. So obviously it's hugely important in terms of economic significance. The thing I would encourage anyone listening to this podcast to do is that over here, the Federation of British Historic Vehicle Clubs is currently running its national survey into our movement. And if you get the chance, go to fbhvc.co.uk and fill it in, because the results of that are going to help garner laws that can help us in this country as well.
I'll dig the link out for that and pop it in the description for the podcast as well. So it should be sort of below on the YouTube or Spotify when you're listening to this, so you can head along and fill in that form. It's interesting, the market talk, but we'll move on to the feature that features in this week's issue, and that is getting your classic sort of revitalized after winter, ready for spring, bringing it out of hibernation. And obviously we've got some great tips lined up in the feature. I wanted to ask the team, what have you got on your to-do list to get your classics ready through spring season? What's sort of sitting at the top of your list, or is there anything you've learned from the feature that you should probably be tackling?
Well, I use mine kind of almost every day, so it's a bit of a tough one. It's survived winter. It's not a big fan of the cold or the wet, but one thing that bothers me, I will be buying a second car at some point because I don't like putting miles on, but I also don't like the fact that there are elements of it prone to rust, and I think a lot of the storage solutions that are out there could be helpful to me. But mine isn't so much of a winter problem. It's more of just an age problem, and that I need to kind of update a few areas of it. Like the boot pneumatics, where the boot currently doesn't stay up and it kind of comes down on my head often, which isn't fun when you're putting shopping in the back in a Tesco car park. And so that's definitely something, but that's an easy fix.
No, I think the whole point of this feature is that it can sort of be taken as a just the main maintenance points to bear in mind. So it's getting your classic back on the road. Obviously, if it is that for whatever reason you've made the decision to sort of give your car a break over winter, which is absolutely fine. Likewise, there's plenty of people who use their cars throughout, such as James, or even maybe not even a daily basis, just go to the likes of the various sort of Christmas and New Year's and regular sort of monthly meets that you can go to, sort of thing. But I think the idea here was just that you use that sort of, it's the 5th of March issue. It's a case of we are now officially into spring. Yay. Winter is done. And yeah, just some care and attention, just a general sort of checklist that you can go through step by step, just to sort of, make sure that when your car does come out, that it starts first time, that it's running well, it's healthy, and you can get straight into going to some fantastic events. So, I mean, in terms of the Mini, it's an oil change for me at the very least. But yeah, as I said, I do want to give it a decent check over just to make sure there's nothing that I've missed.
David, I think jumping out for you?
Yeah, I think for me, the one thing I'm really guilty of is procrastination, which I'm forever thinking, oh, I'll go out and take the MX-5 out for a run tomorrow, and it's one of those tomorrow never comes scenarios because life takes over with other things. And the one thing that I did have in my previous digs was I was able to put it indoors and hook it up to a charging cable. At the moment, because I don't have the garage, it means it's not practical to do that. So the one thing I did buy was a battery cut-off switch, which I forgot to fit. So, so it now has a dead battery. So I need to basically pull my finger out, get that fitted. So when I do take the car out for a run, I can just cut the battery off, so that I don't have to use an automotive defibrillator every time I want to take it out for a run, which is a bit tiresome. The other things I need to do with it, again, like Chris, just give it a good, damn good service once it is up and running. And equally, I think it's probably overdue a visit to have a bit of oil slapped over its undersides to keep the tin worm at bay.
Some good bits. I've got a battery cutoff switch on the MG's wiring system, and it is incredibly useful once I've started using it. Otherwise, every time I got to it, it was a case of, like you said, jump starting the car. The one thing that really jumped out to me actually in the feature was the little tip on radiator caps, because I never changed the one on the MG, so I have no clue quite how good it is at keeping the system pressurized. And one of the things I'm working to do with the latest project with new radiator, electric cooling fans and everything is trying to make it a bit more reliable. And if I've got a radiator system, a cooling system that isn't pressurizing properly, that's all for naught. So I think that's going to be one of my sort of to-do lists, or added to my shopping list certainly, is a fresh radiator cap that I can put on the coolant reservoir and keep everything sort of nicely sealed and pressurized. Because what's the point in having a brand new fresh sort of alley radiator and nice thermo fans on the front if it's pumping around unpressurized coolant? But there we go. So that was a great little tip that I found when I was sort of skimming through the bit. But obviously everything else on there is going to be something I address when I simply reassemble the car. But much of the coolant system is still in place and should probably be checked over before I fire it up for the first time. So it's worth the read and worth dipping into, even if you're a seasoned sort of veteran of the garage. It's a great checklist just to cross off bits as you go. Otherwise,
what I loved about that feature, though, just adding to that, Jesse, is it's done you read it in order of almost the things you need to address. So it starts off from when you kind of almost walking into the garage and pull the cover off to getting it running and getting it out there and those first few drives, so it's quite handy. You can dip in, and it's very easy to dip in and out of the things you need to address.
It's nicely laid out, actually. A really good job with the design and sort of the actual writing on this one. So definitely one that I would recommend picking up and just having a gloss through. Anyway, that's pretty much all we've got time for. We've still got a very busy issue to put together. I know feature coming up, we've got 110 years of the ambulance service. There's a buying guide for the Jaguar XK8, and one of our contributors, Theo, finally gets his Series 2A Land Rover back on the road. So plenty to get on with: designing, proofing, editing and reading. So gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me this morning. And we will be back next week with another issue of Classic Car Weekly and another podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and gents, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.